Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our latest First Point USA College Soccer webinar this evening. My name's Ross Duncan. I head up the marketing team here at First Point USA. I'm based over in the UK, and we're extremely delighted to have with us tonight one of the top coaches in college soccer in the States, and Mr. Chad Riley, head coach of Notre Dame men's soccer program, and certainly one of the most decorated coaches in the game right now. He's been at Notre Dame since he was a player there originally. He's been coach for the last 7 seasons. He was prior to that assistant coach and had an extremely successful period as head coach at Dartmouth as well. So we are extremely grateful for Chad's time tonight. And really appreciate everybody joining us tonight. And hopefully you'll find a really insightful session talking about all things college soccer, the kind of pathway, some of Chad's own personal experiences, both as a coach and a player. Talk a little bit about his kind of recruiting style, what he's looking for in his own players, some of the sort of ethos behind his own coaching style, and a few more questions. So we've got a bunch of questions that we'll be asking, but feel free, if you guys have got your own question, just to fire them into the chat box, and we'll ask some of those questions towards the end. So we'll kick things off. Obviously, one of the most famous names in college sport, Chad. Obviously, being a player there as well as a coach, you must be extremely proud, I guess, to be head coach of the men's soccer program there.
Yes, for sure. And first, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here with you guys tonight. But yeah, I love being at Notre Dame. I'm they would say, a convert. I'm just adding it up. I've spent more than half my life now affiliated with Notre Dame, and I couldn't be prouder to be a coach at Notre Dame and for our program specifically. But yeah, it's certainly a dream come true.
Absolutely. And I guess for those who on the webinar tonight that maybe don't know too much about the university, can you tell us about it? It's obviously one of the most iconic brands. Famous name, very historic. What's it like, I guess, being at the university, but also being part of that soccer program?
Yeah, obviously a great name, a Catholic university that has really grown over the last, I forget where, 1842, I think, when it was founded, but it was founded sort of in a bold way, and I think it's continued to grow from a kind of smaller, really undergraduate focused college really to university now that is a great research university, while all at the same time really focused on the undergraduate students. So here in the States, the kind of freshman through your senior year, sort of that 18 to 22 years old, we have more than 30 dorms, so where the students live on campus. So it's really kind of a living, learning together community, within the confines of the university. But yeah, I love it because it's continued to grow in stature, but it's still sort of committed to the core of like being the best place to grow as a young person while you're getting a wonderful degree.
Yeah, sounds a great place to be. And obviously, switching sport for a moment, must have been a great buzz around the campus over the last couple of weeks for the football team getting to the national final, just missing out sadly, but it must have been pretty exciting for the last couple of weeks there.
Yeah, it was amazing. I think it's we've got a lot of successful sports, but the one that rallies everybody really across the country and sometimes the world is our American football team, and they had a great season. They have a great group of coaches, and it's just so much fun. Everybody celebrates their team, but also just the university in general. So it was a great year. It caused us to have to reschedule this because we practice in an indoor facility that usually we get at a different time, but since they played all the way into the next semester. So it was pretty exciting for all those guys, and gutted a little bit for them, but at the same time they should be very proud of themselves.
No, definitely. And you've reached your own national championship final yourself in recent history, with the team making it all the way to the final season before last. looking back at that team, and obviously that team won't have changed much this season, but what made it so special between that group of players to get you all the way through to the final?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a fun group, especially the seniors. They were kind of the group of seniors that came in during COVID when we actually were in school, but there were so many restrictions and different things. And so that team came in a tough time when you're trying to be a residential school, all while trying to survive and deal with COVID. And so, that group of seniors that graduated after 23 went to 2 Final Fours, which had never been done before. And then obviously we were sort of a moment away from winning the national championship. So it was a great group of characters, strong people, strong players. And we had a great season and played really well in the final, but how soccer goes sometimes, or football goes. It's just, we didn't put it in at the right times, but it was a special group of guys, tough, and they really love the big moments. I think that was something that we try to pride ourselves on, is, college soccer is sort of part regular season, but really a tournament, and it's single elimination there at the end. So you've got to have guys that embrace those moments and are excited about those sort of anxiety inducing nights where you win, you get to go, you lose, and you're done.
Pretty cutthroat towards the end, yeah. One of the things we certainly talk about at First Point USA, particularly for the international players kind of looking in, is just the quality of the facilities that you have available. Tell us what you guys have at your disposal at Notre Dame, both in terms of the training facilities and the stadium as well.
Yeah, we're very spoiled here. We actually hosted Celtic for a few days in their preseason this summer, Liverpool a few years ago, and they're always floored at what we have. And so, like tonight, we just finished a training session. We have an indoor field that's 120 yards by 60, so not quite wide enough to host a game, but for training, it's amazing. And so we actually have 2 indoor facilities. We work in one with the American football team, and the women's team uses it as well. So we have that facility in the winter. In the sort of when it's not winter up here, we have 2 grass training fields that are kept really well, one for the women, one for us. We do have another turf field that we share with some other teams if we have really bad weather. And then we have a beautiful grass stadium field that at our stadium seats about 3,000 people. So, we get good crowds. I don't know what we average, somewhere around 1,800, because our weekend games, we get a big crowd. Sometimes on a Tuesday night, people aren't super excited to come out in the rain. But and then at our stadium, we have a locker room where we have video, an athletic training room, we can get taken care of. And then we have like a team kind of clubhouse space where there's like a kitchen, a place to hang out, an activation area. And then on campus, there's probably 4 to 5 strength and conditioning areas. So like weights, and that we work with our performance coach. So really we have everything that anybody in the world has, and there's no real excuses not to maximize your potential. We have myself, 2 full-time assistant coach, an operations person that helps with the logistics of everything, food, travel, all those things. We have a sports performance coach that works with us. So for fitness, strength conditioning, we have a physio, or what we call here an athletic trainer, that handles a lot of the medical side of it. We have a sports nutritionist, a sports psychologist. So we really have the gamut of everything you could want as a young person trying to maximize your ability as a student, and obviously as an athlete, like we're speaking.
Yeah, sounds a great place to be. And you've obviously come into it as a successful playing career, as I mentioned, and taking over from Bobby Clark, who we're pretty close to here at First Point USA, a kind of legend, probably the doyen of college soccer coaching in the States. And you've got a pretty high bar that you've set, and you've got to follow. So when it comes to recruitment, you're obviously looking to recruit players at a high standard. What is it you're kind of looking for then in a prospective player when it comes to looking for the best players that can take you and keep you at that level?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think it's, I've tried to continue the philosophy, because I think it's the university. And I think Bobby, who you mentioned, why he loved his time at Notre Dame, because I think he was in sync with the place. And so we want to be a place that the best 18 12-year-olds come in and can grow. And so I think with that, there's a certain hunger to improve that you have to have. So I think, there's a lot of good players out there that look good, but one of the first things when we're watching them is like, how hungry are they? And that a lot of that's their activity on the field. The next thing we want to be a smart team. And so some of that, the first sort of window that we get at that are decisions on the ball. So I always say that's one of the first things. And that was something I learned from Bobby is like, okay, what decisions are they making on the ball? And so that lets you know how they think the game a little bit from that. And then obviously you start to get into positional things and athleticism and things like that. But that hunger, those decisions on the ball are sort of the first things you look at in the eye. And then as you get to know the young people, obviously they have to have great grades to get into Notre Dame. As much as I would like to just pick and choose whoever I want, I have to always get the admissions office to sign off on them. And so I'm sure these people on the call tonight have heard that, but grades. But I think that also gives me a window into the habits of the young person's life, because to succeed at Notre Dame, you have to be organized, you have to be driven to do well, not only on the field, but almost more importantly off the field. And then I think as we get to know them, is like, are they really interested in being part of a team? Because I think I know it sounds like common sense, but you hear the word pathway and different things and all that stuff's good. But when you come to Notre Dame, you're going to be on a team, and we want a team full of guys that are great teammates. And so I think that's the sort of intangible stuff we start to try to suss out when we have visits and phone calls is, they're driven themselves, but they really have a desire to just be a part of a great team, if that makes sense.
You kind of briefly mentioned there the sort of off-field attributes as well. I've heard you speaking in a couple of other interviews about the culture. What is the sort of culture, not only behind the soccer program, but the college in general then?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think they try to be the best version of a community. We have 2 main dining halls. So I think in the dream world, it's like the students are living in dorms together, they go to classes together, they go to extracurricular activities, they eat meals together, and then they just really grow as a family. So it's hard to be a family with necessarily 8,500 undergrads, but I think that's the goal. And then we try to be a part of it. So we have our own little family within the soccer team, but I really encourage them to, in their dorms, where they live, how do they get into those communities? So, in the dream scenario, they have all these overlapping communities that help them kind of grow and develop, and give them a shoulder when they need one, give them a push when they need one. But I think that's the essence of Notre Dame, is to try to be that one big sort of team and family with your little units throughout that. And then kind of like I said to start, we try to be a part of that and have that same spirit of, can we really be a family for one another?
And I guess on the more sort of technical side of the game, then you've been a coach, I think, for just over 20 years, and the game's going to have evolved during that time. What would you say now is your coaching style, and has that changed much in recent years?
Yeah, I mean, I think it has been fun. The game's, it's interesting how it's like, seems like it's this big circle sometimes, because like some of the formations, you going back to Bobby, back when they played like inside forwards and the WM and those different things. And so, I think there's little things that change, but I think it's all the basis of like, we want to play a brand that, like I said before, is a team. And so it's this idea of like, we're going to have some special players, but our identity is a team. And so one of the first things we are is, a team that tries to press the other team and win the ball. That's become, pretty popular now, which is nice. So it, you don't usually have to talk kids into the hard work of pressing as maybe you used to when it was a little bit newer of a concept. And so then I think the team pressing has gotten so much better, even at our level, that your ability on the ball is even more important. And I think we're always trying to build a team that can control the game with the ball and without the ball. And so, and then you're placing slightly different emphasis on it. So we want to be aggressive in the pressing. We're not going to sit back and kind of counter. Sometimes that's going to happen based on the opponent or the time of the year. And then with the ball, we want to be a team that doesn't just count passes, but is looking for their possession to create chances as quickly as possible is our goal. And so that tension's always I try this thing or do I move it to the next guy? And I think, those principles have been there. Obviously so much of my thinking and teaching of the game goes back to Bobby, which goes way back to, some Scottish coaches from yesteryear. And then I think you're just always trying to teach your team, because they come into it at a different time where, youth soccer is different than it was for a time. So your emphasis has to change, but you're still trying to have those, those same elements mastered in the game. And then I think the unique thing that I try to really stay focused on, like we hit on earlier, that, you have this regular season, but then really your tournament's defined by, the equivalent of cup soccer, right? It's going to be, and so you have to be great in transition moments. You have to be good on set pieces. And so we call those championship habits. So you have to be good in the sort of modern sense of the game, but then you have to be good in those cold nights in Aberdeen where it might be a set piece that gets you the game.
That's good advice. And I think we've obviously got a lot of players on the call tonight that are, we're working with or maybe kind of getting involved in their journey for the first time and at the start of their journey. And I suppose the golden nugget question is always, what advice would a leading coach like yourself give to an aspiring player that's just kind of at the start of their journey? What nuggets of advice would you pass on to them at that stage?
Yeah, I think something I've been focusing on, even with our guys a lot, is kind of working backwards. And so, do some research and really start to think like, okay, when you start, you're like, oh, I want to go to this school just because maybe you saw a commercial, or, maybe it's because I don't know, Sky TV had the Notre Dame football game on. And so you think that way. But I think now with the internet, with the stuff is, can you start to think a little bit further and say, okay, when I'm done with my degree, what do I want to accomplish? What do I want to study? What level do I want to play at? Is, how much is, immediate playing time important? How much is scholarship important? All of those things. And once you start to think about those things, then kind of refining your list down, and then starting to do that research. I mean, you can see so many games, if you have the resources, can you make a trip over and hit a couple of camps? But I think in general, working backwards from, okay, what is your success going to be? Is it just, I want to get to the States and play soccer? Then you're sort of going to be guided everywhere. Or do you want to do a little bit more digging than that and say, I would hope to get this out of my college experience, and then start to do research? Because I think that's when my goal when recruiting is, even if I really like a player, I want it to be the right fit. And I think that's what the young person should be searching for, is what is that right fit? Do as much research as you can, advocate for yourself as much as you can. And then I think, being realistic when an option's closed, do you move on and find the next one? Because I do believe it's challenging to get to universities and colleges in some ways, but those opportunities are always going to be there for the person that just sort of keeps plugging away, has a plan, and has sincere interest in the place that they're looking at.
And then when it comes to recruiting, then you've obviously got a team around you. You've got your assistant coaches. Are you guys on the lookout all the time? I mean, typically, how many players would you recruit for a season?
Yeah. I mean, I think with where we are now, you are sort of always looking. So, I'm sure some of the people are familiar, but a lot has changed in college sports over the years. So you now have a transfer portal. And so while a lot of people don't leave Notre Dame, there will be turnover that way. We will have young American kids signing homegrown contracts for their MLS team. So you have some unexpected events that happen. And so you're always recruiting. And then the next thing that will be settled in April is this, not to get into too much detail, big lawsuit, which basically will give sort of roster caps that are pretty comfortable for soccer. I think if it goes through, we'll be at 28. So, okay, you divide that roughly by 4, and then, figure you're going to lose 1 or 2 guys every year. So you're in that kind of 6 to 7 to maybe 8 a year kind of recruiting. And then, it is, we sort of just scour the whole world, really. I think Notre Dame's interesting. It just made a a commitment to be need blind for internationals as well. So you can fill out an online calculator to sort of understand how much kind of university scholarship you would need, which will be good, or how much you would get, which would be good for us. But rewinding a little bit, I have 2 coaches, and so we recruit a little bit on video. We go all over the country recruiting. Obviously, talk to you guys and different places when we're looking for players.
Sounds good. And taking it back then to your own career, you had a very successful playing career where you are now, still holding a couple of records to your name, which is great. From your own perspective as a player, what do you think kind of made you stand out? Obviously, you had the talent and the ability, but what would be those kind of driving factors behind your own success, do you think, as a player?
Yeah, I think, what I've found is just the habits. And I think it was something I was fortunate to, for whatever reason in life to have a good structure and good habits that kind of guided me, and a good family around it. And then I think during my time at Notre Dame, I was fortunate that Bobby came and started coaching us, because I think he started to, show the game in a different way to all of us. But I do think those habits, because it's never going to be, oh, you had a great week. I mean, you got to put a lot of great weeks together to have a great season and a great career. So I think, it all comes back to having those good habits that are helping you along your sort of your way to your goals. And I think, one of the things, if I had to do a little bit better, is like, don't become obsessed with achieving your goals. Just know that's the direction of your efforts. Because I think that's sometimes you can lose confidence if you don't you don't meet some goal that you set for yourself at that given time. And then I think the part that I got better at as I got older, and then even coaching, is I think psychologists maybe call it now self-regulated learning. But it's that idea of like, all right, you don't have to, you can maybe have a journal, but you go into practice with a plan, with a kind of area to focus on a little bit, you do it. And then can you take that little bit of time after training and say like, okay, how did I do on that? Okay, could you do better? And then the next day to try to apply that. But I found, that helped me of just like reflecting, and then the next day, can I get a little bit better? Mm-hmm. And I think over my career, it certainly helped me grow as a player.
And is that something you've tried to impart on your own players as a coach then, kind of following some of those similar habits and traits?
Yeah, for sure. I think we try to, I think our goal is to be the best developmental program for 18 to 22-year-olds in the world, right? So we're always trying to do that better, given, kind of modern psychology, cutting edge stuff like that. But I think it all comes back to that one, even for yourself, being open that you can improve. I always tell guys that sometimes when they're grumpy about training, you're like, well, if we didn't think we could get better, why are we doing this? Right. But yes, I try to follow some of the things that I did and then do it better. And like right now, we at this time of the year, we sit down with every player, and we have like I think it's a common thing now, IDP. And we try to say like, you've got a lot of strengths, keep those, but like, what's one thing now for the next 4 to 6 weeks that you can really focus on in training, and then maybe outside of training, just to improve on. Because I think sometimes we try to get better at so many things, and you make a little bit of improvement, but if you can really focus on one thing at a time, I think you can kind of add some qualities to yourself a little bit quicker, maybe.
It sounds like it served you very well. I'm sure it'd be good advice for people on the call tonight to follow. One of the questions we get quite a lot is just kind of looking at a typical day in the life of a head soccer coach, and just to get a bit more of an insight into your role and how your typical day operates. So if you just kind of give us a bit of a whistle-stop tour of a typical day, maybe in season.
Yeah, no, I think it's good. I think the good thing when you're coaching, like, 28 to 30, 18 to 22-year-olds, there's always surprises. And so there's a lot of typical days. But yeah, so during the, once classes start, the typical day, I got a 10, 8, and a 6-year-old. So my first job of the day is getting them up and getting breakfast and getting them active and going to school. And then typically we'll get into the office in the morning, and we try our best to kind of plan training right away. So with my other 2 coaches, we'll do that. And at the same time, we'll usually do a little bit of video every day. So then we'll talk about training, talk about, video either from the previous game or is it setting us up for the next game. Do that. Usually then, most days you're meeting with a couple of players throughout the season, whether for soccer things or, or just school things or unrelated things. And then, one of the challenges during the fall when you're playing 2 games a week, you're sort of is how do you keep a handle on recruiting? So we try to talk about recruiting every day, and whether you're setting up visits, because you'll usually have 4 to 5 weekends in the fall where you'll be hosting guys, that, and then before you know it, you're out, usually get out to training an hour before it starts. And so to set up, to kind of clear your mind, to get away from some of the administrative work that you've just been doing. And then we meet in the locker room to do a little video at 3:45, then usually out to the field by, 4:05, 4:10, then train. Training usually finishes by about 6, and then usually at home or picking up a kid from a soccer practice. And then 2 nights a week during those times you're playing games, usually a Tuesday, Friday. We'll have games at 7:00. So those days are a little bit different. And then typically we try to keep Sundays off. We try to keep a consistent game schedule. So if we play Tuesday, Friday, you regen and train on Saturday, and then Sunday will be off. But that's a typical day and a typical week for me during the season.
Yeah. Then switching to the players then, and again, a question we get, and the difference between the fall season and the spring season as a player. I know that might change in the near future, potentially with some of the changes, but as things stand at the moment, how different are those 2 times of year for your student athletes?
Yeah, I think they're quite a bit different, mainly for the games and the travel. What I do here, what we do is like we call the fall season kind of our competitive results driven. Like we've got to do what we can to get results for the team. And so the team's really focused. And then now we call it, because you're always competing, your competitive development season. And so in some ways you're pushing the whole group harder in training, on the field, in the weight room, running now than you would necessarily in the fall. But I think the biggest difference is you're not traveling on the weekends. You're not traveling midweek. So you're taking out, 20 games, and you substitute them with, our spring schedule will kind of go from February 23rd, we play the Columbus Crew Reserves, to April 29th, we play Northwestern. And so we'll have, between 5 and 7 games during that time. So training in some ways is much harder in the winter and spring. But the nice part is, I do like it for the college students because they get to be here on the weekend. They get to know the students at Notre Dame. They get to be kind of a regular college student for some time.
Yeah. Okay. And you're obviously in a very competitive environment, competitive conference. You're playing all over the country. From an academic standpoint, I know that the demands are high. How difficult is to balance being a full-time player with the rigors of having to study as well, when you've got all that kind of traveling and training going on?
Yeah, it's really hard. I mean, it's the expectation, but I think I am continually impressed with what our guys are able to do. And it doesn't necessarily happen overnight. Sometimes, usually, the first semester can be very difficult. We have a summer bridge program where we try to bring in freshmen in the summer to kind of start acclimating them, but it's hard to truly acclimate to. I mean, the level of soccer is so high. It's pretty amazing. And then, you're at the, it's like one of the top universities in the world. So it's kind of, you get a little whiplash in that first semester, but then with the support of us, the team, we have an office that supports our student athletes with tutoring and different things. I think the guys surprise themselves by the end of kind of the first full year with everything that they can achieve, because it is a lot, but I think clearly they can do it. And I think it's part of the reason it's a transformational experience for them, because it's not easy.
Yeah. Okay. And a question we've kind of asked a few of the coaches that have come on, and some can't quite give us an answer, but we'll test you out on this one. If you can pick either a couple or one of the best players you've worked with over your time as a coach. What made those players or that player stand out? I know you've had guys going on to play MLS and professional clubs. Is there a kind of standout name you could pick and maybe the reasons why they would kind of stand out as much?
Yeah, I mean, I think I can even go back to, because I think the qualities are similar, but now he's retired and he's an easy one to talk about. But I was an assistant coach, and he came back and talked to the team this year. But Matt Beasler, who was I think he was the captain of the U.S. national team in the 2014 World Cup, and then played at Sporting Kansas City for a long time. A few clubs in England tried to get him after the World Cup, but he was in his hometown. They were paying him a lot of money, so he chose to stay. And I think he was one of the first times, you just really saw kind of some of the things I was talking about earlier of just like those. He had a good left foot. He was a good athlete, all of those things. But he played, and I think he started one game his freshman year. To think you're going to captain a World Cup team, 5 years, it'd been like 7 years after that. I'm sure he would have pinched himself, but he was one of those, just, he had that inner belief in himself, you could tell, but then he did just really focus on what he could control. And he just put a lot of good training sessions together. When he got his chance, he was always ready. And then he had just a good habits around his life. He ate well, he slept well. I think everybody likes to hear the crazy training regimens or something like that. But I think, as a coach, I've found it's the guys that day in, day out do all of the little things well over the course of the time. They grow more than anyone else. And so if I look at all the players that have achieved big things that I've had the chance to work with, I was just texting with a guy that has been in the MLS for 7 or 8 years, a guy, Wyatt Omsberg, won 4 Ivy League titles at Dartmouth, and he was the same. And you just go back and you're like, I can't remember those guys having one bad training session, which is easy to say, but when you think of 4 years of 18 to 22, girlfriends, school, all of those things, and to be able to put in good high level training sessions every time you're with them, that's pretty impressive.
Good role models to follow, certainly. And looking back on your career then as a coach, and you kind of touched upon some of these things earlier, but what would you say are the biggest changes you've seen just maybe in the evolution of college soccer during that time? And are those change, or how are those changes maybe helping the players that you're recruiting?
Yeah, I think the level of coaching is gotten so much higher. I think just now it's there's so many generations now that have played at a decent level. So I think the player that you're not teaching them the same things that you would have been teaching a college player 25 years ago. Everybody's got a good tactical understanding. And then I think, through your guys' good work, some of the international influence and a lot of the universities has just meant there's more, especially on the men's side, just more good teams. And so it's just driven the overall standards so much higher. So now when you go and you play a U23 team of Derby County or Aberdeen or something like that, I think, it's not that different at all, to be honest with you. And so I think, the quality of the coaching, I think the quality of the teams is higher because I think of a lot of the international influence that's in college soccer right now.
Absolutely, and you guys certainly performed well when you visited the UK a couple of years ago, and gave a couple of those teams you've mentioned a pretty good run for their money, and banged a few goals past them, which was good to see. And then in your role then as a head coach, and there's been quite a few changes coming in recently. You got NIL. You mentioned that the transfer portal, the kind of roster changes. How much has that impacted on your role as a coach then?
Yeah, it's challenging at times, I think, because, I always tell people in the recruiting process, I'm not a disgruntled pro coach. This is what I want to do. This is what I want to be an educator first. And all the things that you've talked about are a little bit more kind of professional type things, which is fine. We want to figure out how to make it useful. But I think for soccer right now, most of the programs, well, all of the programs now have 9.9 scholarships. And so, I'm always trying to use those scholarships to make Notre Dame affordable for the students. So, any new thing, NIL, all that kind of stuff, we're always going to say, how do we help our guys pay for their time at Notre Dame? But it's made it a little bit more sporting director than I would like. But at the same time, I think there's always sacrifices, because I love being a part of a team and leading a team. So we want to continue to adapt, but it's definitely, you're feeling like more of a general manager or sporting director than an actual coach than maybe I was 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's certainly the feedback we've heard. Okay, we've got a couple of questions coming in from the audience, which I'll just fire on to you. So someone's just asked, as far as balancing soccer and academics, how often do you check in with your athletes about grades and class attendance?
Yeah, I think one of our things as an educator is that, we hope it's a different experience than high school. So I'm not big on necessarily going to the class to make sure the guys are at class, because if they don't go to class, they're not going to be doing very well. But we try to have it be a natural thing all the time, asking guys how they're doing. But we have an office at Notre Dame called Academic Services for Student Athletes. And so I work with a woman who helps, build our guys' schedules, and especially the first and second years, she organizes tutoring and study halls and different things. So we're on top of them a lot early on. And then, we check in regularly, but then if someone's not doing well, it's usually brought to her attention by one of the faculty members. And then we start to have whatever intervention we need to, with the spirit of trying to help them, learn and grow. So we're heavily invested in the academic side of it. We've got a wonderful office that we partner with that really helps kind of manage the day-to-day of that. And then, like I said, we try to partner with them to support the guys when they need that little bit of supporting, or tough love when they need that little bit of tough love.
Yeah, no, it sounds like there's a lot of support available, which is great.
Yeah.
One here, playing higher level soccer like MLS next, how much would that put someone further up the pecking order when it comes to recruiting them?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that's one of the challenges in college, I think when you're in the pros and you're, buying someone from a league that's similar to yours, it's a little bit more straightforward. I think, the highest levels of youth, so whether it's MLS Next or, various things, I think it just gives us a little better success rate of knowing how they'll translate into the environment that we're in. With that said, one of our best players, walked onto our team. He just got into Notre Dame. We knew him as a young person, bit of a late bloomer physically, and then he's come here and, we were talking about Bobby. He was the first player he noticed on my team when we played Aberdeen a couple of years ago. And so I do think it helps us. We know how to gauge that level a little bit better. So I never put a mandate. Whereas sometimes when you're like, a high school or maybe a lesser league, it's hard to know exactly how they'll translate to the higher level that we play at, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And a related one then, do you attend many tournaments as part of your recruiting? And if so, which ones?
Yeah, we try to hit the biggest ones that we can, especially at this time of the year. We'll go to the different ones, whether it's ECNL, MLS Next. We want to try to, with the new kind of Notre Dame policy on financial aid, try to get abroad a little bit more to see that. But typically we'll go to all the big events and scout that way. And then regionally we'll go around and try to watch games through that. And then we'll also host ID camps, because typically we like to see someone play 3 times before we feel like we have a good read. And so, however we can get that, we try to get those 3 touch points.
Yeah. And one that's relevant to us, and I'll kind of reword it probably. How much benefit is there in using an agency like a First Point or one of our competitors? I know you guys will work with various, but how much of, again, an advantage potentially can that give a player?
Yeah, I think it just makes everything a lot more efficient. I think I found, because we have a lot of these now in in the US as well. And kind of that work I was telling you before, it is hard sometimes when you're completely blind, you don't know whereas you guys have gotten 30 years of experience of this. And so I do think it can help with that efficiency of being like, okay, maybe this is the schools you should be looking at with your grades, with the level you're playing at. And then I think, for you guys, you're such a well-respected organization. Whenever you tell me about someone, I'm going to think of them. So I think it's like anything, it can be done. But to use an example, it's kind of like, if you have a personal trainer, there's a much greater chance that you're going to go work out than if you just put a treadmill in your basement. And so I just think it can be so helpful to have someone that can guide you and be that resource for you.
Yeah, that makes sense. A final one from the floor, touching on women's football then, maybe more from an international perspective. I suppose for certainly girls in the UK, the US has become a much more proven route. Is that certainly something you would recommend to girls maybe from Europe or the UK to go over to the States when you see the success of, say, the England Lionesses team, for example, that are pretty stacked with girls that have played college soccer?
Yeah, 100%. I think I think we're still, it's more challenging on the men's side, but I think on the women's side, it's really amazing what you can do because you get your degree, you get that experience, you get that development as a person. And then I think candidly, our women's coach is a good friend of mine and actually just works in the office behind me. And he was just in London watching a goalie from Crystal Palace this past weekend. I think if they already have more scholarships and more programs and they're going to get more scholarships. And so I think the opportunities are huge there. And I think there's a lot of room for more teams to get better in women's soccer. Cause I think it's concentrated a little bit at the top now, but I think with the influence of international recruits in the UK, I think there's a lot of great opportunities on the women's side. I would really strongly look into the US college system because you can be the best player in the world as well, right? Nate has had two young women go straight from his team to sign with PSG. So
sounds good. Final one from the audience then, and we had Asmir Begovic on with us a couple of months ago talking about all things goalkeeping. But what attributes are you looking for in a goalkeeper? Again, I know the role of a goalkeeper's evolved quite a lot in recent years, but what would you be looking for?
Yeah, no, I'm still a little old-fashioned. I do think it is like like we're talking about Bobby. He was a goalie before they even wore gloves, and so he was a tough guy. But yeah, I think the first thing is it's an interesting one. Is that presence, and you sort of know it when you see it. But I think that's something you sort of see, and maybe that's size, maybe that's just the way they impact the team. And then I do think the first thing is their ability to stop shots, obviously. And then I think from there, it's like, okay, how do they take crosses? And then from there, it's their distribution, how are they with their feet? And then, the next one is their communication, right? I think, we try to look in that order, because at the end of the day, your number one goal is to stop the ball from going in the net. And then it kind of all goes from there. But I do think that first thing is you want that person back there to make the team feel confident in front of them. And so there's a certain way that goalies need to carry themselves, to me, to really help the team.
Good. No, we've certainly got a few goalies on our books just now, so hopefully the guys listening will pick that one up.
Yeah.
That's great. Appreciate that. Final question from me then. What makes Notre Dame such a special place then to be to be a student athlete? I mean, it looks incredible from the outside looking in, but you've obviously experienced it from both sides.
Yeah, I think, and people that are more familiar with what's going on in college sports here, I think Notre Dame's always trying to stay kind of up with the modern times, but at the same time, hopefully protecting the experience of kind of yesteryear, where you get to be a young person, you get an education. I think that's the tension in a lot of places is, our guys go to school, they go to class. They're not treated, they have professional resources, but they're students first. And I think sometimes that can be annoying when you're being pushed by someone to do study hall, but I think to me, it just reveals that they really care about the person for the long run and not just what that person can do for them on the field for this 4 years. And it's why I love working at Notre Dame. It's my dream job. Is they don't get everything right, but I think the intention's always right. Is like, how are we the best place in the world for a young person to go to school, to, learn, to grow, and then on the soccer side to grow as a soccer player as well. And I think that's what makes it special. Even as we add, these beautiful buildings and beautiful things, I think at the core of it, the university cares about its people and wants to give them a wonderful education so that they can lead a fulfilling life afterwards.
That's I think that's a great insight to finish on, Chad. And really appreciate your time with us this evening. You've given us some fantastic answers and great to hear about your experience and some of your kind of tips and advice for the guys and girls that have joined us here this evening. So we hope everybody's enjoyed this. We've recorded this evening, so everybody who's registered, you maybe joined kind of halfway through, whatever, we'll send out a recording of this in the next day, and you'll have the chance to kind of recap it all and watch it back. We'll be sharing a couple of the answers on our social media channels as well, the sort of highlights reel. So yeah, Chad, thanks very much for your time. Best of luck for the remainder of 2025 and going into next season. We'll hopefully be over there to give you guys a visit, and hopefully we'll see you over here in the UK as well on your next tour to some of the clubs over in Britain.
No, I'd love that. Thank you so much again. Anytime. I love my time with you.
Brilliant. Thanks everybody. Thanks for joining. And any questions, just fire them through on our social media channels or direct to firstpointusa.com. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Chad.